Hi, I'm Peyton with Shoshone Adventure Consultings, and welcome back to our next episode of our Shoshone Seminar Series. We put these Seminar Series videos together to answer frequently asked questions that we get from, well, everybody when they call Shoshone, when they're asking about booking their next adventure. Well, here we are at Dallas Safari Club 2026. I'm with my good friend Thomas of with Highveld Taxidermy, and I thought what better place to film our next Seminar Series than, well, in Disneyland for hunters here at Dallas Safari Club in Atlanta. Today we're going to be talking about all things Africa and taxidermy. When clients call us looking for that next hunt, a lot of times they ask, what do I do with the animals I shoot? Thomas, do I bring them back to the US? How much does it cost? What's the process to get my animals shipped back? And really they have a few options, and that's what we're here to talk about on this seminar series. Thomas, welcome. Thanks for taking a few minutes.
Appreciate the time.
I first met Thomas over nearly 25 years ago when I had my first animals that I ever shot in Africa on my first safari mounted by Highveld. They're still in my house. They still look amazing. And I've been using their services ever since and proud to do so. And Thomas, I've got a lot of questions for you. I appreciate you taking a few minutes.
Of course.
Floor is yours for a moment for an introduction.
Perfect.
And just the history of Highveld.
Yes, 25 years, we've been in business since 1981. My dad started this business with 5 employees, and then we scaled it up. As we added services, we do our own tanning, we added a division for that, we do woodwork, we actually offer a whole bespoke trophy experience. So it's not just taxidermy anywhere where you get into a room and it's just one head after the other looking straight. It's evolved to much more of a home decor and a very planned procedure. So that's where we get involved on a one-on-one basis with our clients, and we customize every mount nowadays to go into the house or the space that they've picked out. But it's been an adventure over the years, yes, and 25 years, you've had your trophies.
Yeah.
So, and we have a lot of clients that have those stories, and I think it's really important also for trophy care that you know what you do on a yearly basis to preserve those trophies, but I think we're going to get to that in a later section.
Like I said before, one of the things clients ask about when it comes to, what can we shoot? How much does it cost? And one of the big parts of booking your safari is what happens to the animals after they're shot. Mm-hmm. So Thomas, when somebody is planning that, especially that first safari, once they've been once or twice, they get the memo, right?
Yes.
But when they're planning that first safari and they're sitting at home and during the anticipation of it, what are some things regarding taxidermy that they need to think about ahead of time?
And we get that a lot, and we actually suggest that they come to the shop before the actual hunt. Because a lot of people can't imagine, how big a kudu is, for instance. A kudu, we normally work on a vertical wall space of 65 inches from the brisket to the tip of the horns. Now that's quite a space that you need to accommodate for.
Yeah.
And also, people think with a zebra you can just do a flat rug. But we can do, for instance, a 3D mount. We can do a pedestal mount. We can do a shoulder mount of a zebra. So those are things that people need to know before they tell the guys at the hunting company what they need to skin out for. Because once you've skinned a zebra for a flat skin, for instance, you're going to be splitting right at the bottom of the chin. You cannot use that for a shoulder mount anymore, for instance.
Oh, I see.
So I think that kind of pre-planning and knowing what you'd like out of a trophy, that is really a really good step to take before you go on your first hunt. And that's why we sometimes have discovery calls with clients where they actually say, I've got this list here. Tell me what would be the optimal mix of trophies. What should I do with these? And this is the space I've got available.
So maybe even taking measurements before they go on their wall space where they're thinking about putting stuff. And we have had clients visit the shop on the way to the hunting farms because they've never seen a lot of these animals up close. They don't know what the anatomy looks like. They don't know how pretty they are.
Yes.
And actually, in some cases, I think it gives them an idea of maybe some other animals that they want to shoot
Exactly.
before they ever get there. What are some of the most common animals that are mounted, especially by first-time safari goers? The most common critters that you see coming to the shop from clients?
We have a kudu usually in the mix with the first safari.
Right.
A kudu, probably a blue wildebeest, either a blesbok or an impala or both. So those are the very common animals. And then on a second safari, you'll probably add on a waterbuck or a hartebeest, a nyala. Nyala is sometimes part of the first safari because, as you said, once a nyala walks out in front, they are such beautiful, stunning animals.
Yep.
They really make an amazing trophy. So, but a first hunt, anything from between 7 and 10 animals is the usual what a hunter will take.
I understand. What are some of the pros, and here's another question we get, should I have my taxidermy work done in South Africa or should I have it done back in the US? What are some of the pros to having it done in South Africa versus having it done by your own taxidermist in the US, maybe that you feel comfortable with, that's mounted 10 whitetail for you and elk and everything? What are your thoughts on that?
I think anatomical knowledge is really important. So taxidermy, you see everything on an African animal because the skin is thick, but the hair is very thin. It's not like a North American animal, like a polar bear or like a grizzly bear or a moose or an elk. They have very long hair. So you can hide a lot of the detail. It actually gets lost. Whereas on a kudu, you have such thin hair. You will see every single vein on some of the kudus. You'll see the neck detail. So I think that's really important. That's what some people don't take into account. So the anatomy, first of all. Second of all is the time it takes to process the hides. So as we get them from the hunting farm, the hides are in the tannery within 2 weeks. So that's when the bacterial process actually gets halted. So that's really important because a dip and ship process is just to make the animals safe for export. It's actually not a tanning process. That's what people forget. So first of all, they'll have a cost on a dip and pack order, and then their taxidermist gets it, and that's 6 months down the line by the time it's in the US. And then they've got to get it to their tannery, and then the process only starts. Whereas our tanning process starts pretty much 2 weeks after the animal is hunted.
Really?
The process is almost done on the tanning side. So I would say those are the two massive advantages.
And we work with a lot of quality outfitters in South Africa, but you don't just take animals in from there. You can reach out to Zimbabwe, Botswana, Mozambique. You get animals in from all those countries from clients. Is that right? I mean,
Yes,
it's not just
exactly.
in South Africa.
We've got collection points all over Africa.
Okay.
So we actually send trophy tags, and most of the guys in Zimbabwe, Botswana, Tanzania, all of those outfitters know Highveld.
Yeah.
And then once they see the tags, they'll reach out to our offices, and we actually facilitate the whole import process. So there's no extra paperwork on the client's behalf.
Sure. One of the places that we filmed one of our first seminar series that we did was with our friend Peter and Cruiser Safaris in South Africa. And we book hunts for Cruiser and Dries Visser that are in the same area. I'll use those two as an example. When a client brings you, or one of the outfitters brings you the hides and the horns from there, what is the condition they're in? What are they like? What do you do to them when they come in? How do they preserve them to get them from point A to point B?
And that's one of the most important steps. And that's why it's so important to choose an outfitter that's professional.
Yeah.
Because that's where it starts, is trophy care. So ideally, when I receive a trophy shipment, I like to see the following. I'd like to see that the skulls are separated from the skins, first of all.
Why is that?
Because if the skulls sit on the skins, the brain liquefies, and that fatty matter of the brain actually gets on the skins, and that facilitates bacterial growth. And bacteria is the enemy of good taxidermy, because that just causes hair loss and all sorts of problems down the line. So first of all, we'd like that separation. Then, if I look at the skin, it should be pure white. There should be no meat left on the hide and no fat left on the hide. For instance, a zebra skin, that's where you see it first. On a zebra skin, on the mane, it's got a fatty section where the mane goes into a V shape. And that's a fatty deposit underneath the mane. If that gets left in, that zebra will not have a hair left on its mane, because that bacteria will destroy the whole underlying structure of the skin. So it's so important that the skinner knows what they're doing. So they don't cut holes into the skin, but they also don't leave any flesh or meat on it. And then the skins get washed, and then they get salted. So we receive them dried and salted, and then they go into our tanning process after that.
And then can you explain the overall steps to get it to my front door?
Yes, so we'll start our process. And so we start off with showing photos of the received items. So we actually build a website for the clients where all of their photos are posted with a date stamp. And throughout the project, those will be updated. So you'll see, almost like looking in the window of the shop, you'll actually see the tan skins, the photos of those, the mannequins as we shape them. And then we get the okay from the client. That's what I had in mind, and then we carry on. So throughout, you actually kept abreast of what's happening. And then once it comes to time to ship, We actually build the crate and we hand over to Oxy Logistics, and then Paula will determine the best way to get the trophies to the client, be that sea freight or air freight,
Right.
and then we'll do multiple costings. So these days on bigger shipments, sea freight is the preferred method because it's just a much better volumetric rate that we get there. But we are very upfront. So even during the quoting process, I believe in giving a client all the information upfront, that there's no surprises.
No.
The worst is if you go on a safari and you budget on a certain amount, and then you get all these surprise charges down the line until it's at your door.
Yeah.
So I avoid that. So in the quoting process for taxidermy, we'll even give a shipping quote, which we'll guarantee to within $100 accuracy.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when somebody's having their crate packed for their taxidermy, if they buy a piece of artwork in South Africa, for example, or a spear, a shield, or something like that, they obviously can't take it back in their luggage. Is that something that they can leave with you and have put in their crate to ship back with their taxidermy work? Is that's perfectly legal? Anything but alcohol and things like that, right?
That's right.
Okay.
So a lot of clients actually do that. The only caveat is that you cannot ship cured hides. So some of these traditional African drums have a cured hide on them, so it's not a tanned hide. So that's the only exception. But carved curios and any curio items, paintings, we'll actually ship with the order. And if it's wood that requires fumigation, we'll actually get it fumigated and have a certificate attached to that, so there's no problems at import stage.
For taxidermy like mine, like I said, I've got animals mounted on my wall that were mounted by Thomas probably personally 25 years ago. Tips and tricks to keep those clean. There's a lot of misinformation out there on the internet, Googling, YouTube, or whatever about how to keep taxidermy clean. What are some tips and tricks that guys can use to clean their mounts carefully?
Perfect, and that's a question we get often. So the general rule is to avoid anything that is oil-based, because oil will actually attract dust and actually stick the hair together. So years down the line, you will have big problems where a taxidermist might not even be able to unstick that hair. So what we suggest is to use a pure alcohol, like a rubbing alcohol, dampen a cloth with that, and go in the direction of the hair just to get the dust off. It'll bring the shine back to the hair. Do that maybe once a year or every 6 months if it's a really dusty environment.
Yeah.
So that's the number one for the skins. For the horns, they don't need much treatment, but if you live in a very dry climate or you've got the heat on, if it's a really cold winter and you've got very, very dry conditions, what's really good is a clear floor wax, a clear floor wax liquid that you put onto the horns, leave it on for a day, and then you just buff it off with a nylon scrubbing brush. That'll bring the shine back and it'll nourish the horns as well. But one thing that people do miss is that we do suggest that you fumigate your trophy room at least once a year. Because there's always a chance of mites getting into the hair and eating off the roots of the hair. And we can't use any forever chemicals that will keep on killing mites or infestations. So that's a common misconception. Tanning preserves the skin, but it can still be affected by mites down the line. Especially if you have bird taxidermy, that usually brings mites into a trophy room.
The birds do?
Yes.
Interesting. I know that over the years, you guys have mounted elephants to giraffe. What is maybe not the largest, but the most unique, something that sticks out that you guys have mounted? Somebody came to you and you're like, okay, I think we can do that. Does anything stick out like that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
The number one is a walrus that we received.
In South Africa?
We received a walrus.
Okay, all right.
So now you think this is a relatively shapeless animal, but the shapelessness makes it a really hard thing to do taxidermy on. We took that thing apart probably about 20 times.
Really?
And redid it based on photos. So it's not something that swims around in Johannesburg. So we had to get detailed photos and videos. And that took us a while, but the skin is also surprisingly thick to work with. So that was an adventure.
On something like an elephant, if somebody, whether it's a replica or real or whatever, but you do a full elephant, how many people will work on that from start to finish, on a mount that large, from receiving to crating?
Well, as the skin comes in, that skin weighs about a ton on an elephant before we even shave it down and we tan it. So just handling the skin, we need about 10 people. to get that shave down. So we use big shaving knives to cut the skin down. So it starts off about this thick, and then we need to shave it down to a manageable thickness before tanning. And then we use scaffolding and cranes, and then four to five taxidermists will work on that, going around probably about for a 3-month period, until that skin is tight enough and the wrinkles have settled enough that it stays in place. So every morning you're actually lifting, you're basically doing a facelift every morning on it, because gravity will sag the skin back down and you're lifting it back up and making sure that all the detail is right. So it's quite a project.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I think all of this is great advice. These are things that when you call us looking to book a hunt, I love talking Africa. It's my favorite thing. You can barely get me off the phone. But taxidermy is really something you have to think about before you go. I will say that you don't have to pay it all up front. It's a bill that you can pay over time and really up to a year later, but it does need to go into the budgeting for your trip. Yes. But take some time to think about it. Look at the animals that you're looking to hunt. Where are you going to put them in your house? Where are you going to, how are you going to mount them? The measurements and things like that. And quite frankly, it's a lot of fun thinking about it, and it goes into the anticipation of your hunt. Thomas, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your business.
Thank you very much. To the next 25 years.
To the next 25 years, I hope so. Thank you very much.